My name is Maya Vance, and I was 24 the day my own father laughed at me in a lawyer's office. We were there for the reading of my grandfather's will. The lawyer cleared his throat, looked at me, and said I had inherited a 5-acre muddy swamp and nothing. The room fell silent. My dad leaned back, sneering, and said it loud enough for everyone. He always knew you were a failure. Now you own a piece of dirt. I didn't argue. I signed, picked up the deed they slid across the table and walked out. What none of them understood was that the swamp held a zoning trap. My grandfather had spent my whole childhood teaching me that real power hides underneath the mud. 72 hours later, I knew exactly what he'd done. If you've ever been handed the smallest seat at the table, this one is for you. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. Family is a funny word. People think it means love. People think it means safety. But for me, family was a heavy locked door, and my father, Arthur Vance, held the only key. It was November 12th, 2012, a cold, wet Monday in Seattle, Washington. I was 24 years old. I was sitting at my desk in the back corner of Vance Logistics. My desk was right next to the giant copy machine. Every time it printed, the floor shook. It smelled like warm ink and dust. My brother Lucas sat in the front office. His office had big glass windows. He had a soft leather chair. I had a hard plastic one. But we both worked for the same company, the company our father built from my grandpa George's old trucking route. Dad always said, "Blood is the foundation of business, Maya." He said it a lot, but he did not treat his blood the same way. Lucas was the golden child. He was 27. He was tall, with Dad's strong jaw and loud laugh. Lucas could talk to anyone. He played golf with our big clients. He took long lunches, but he did not know how to read a balance sheet. He did not know how to pay the truck drivers. I did that. I did everything. I remember looking at the old chipped white coffee mug on my desk. It had a crack down the side. I used to run my fingernail over that crack when I felt angry. It was my secret habit. That crack felt like my life. Dad walked out of his big office. He wore his expensive dark blue suit. He smelled like strong mint and dry cigars. He walked past my desk without looking at me. He stopped at Lucas's door. "Lucas, my boy," Dad said loudly. His voice was thick and proud. "Are you ready for the Miller meeting at 2 p.m.? "Yeah, Dad," Lucas said. He was tossing a golf ball in the air and catching it. "Just waiting on the numbers." Dad turned slowly. He finally looked at me. His eyes were cold. "Maya, where are the Miller files? Your brother needs them to close the deal. Don't slow him down." I picked up the blue folder from my desk. I had worked on those numbers until 3 a.m. last night. My eyes were burning. My back was aching. I walked over and handed the folder to Dad. "The profit margins are tight," I said quietly. "If you look at page 4, we need to cut the shipping cost by 2%, or we lose money." Dad snatched the folder from my hand. He did not say thank you. He did not look at page 4. He just handed it directly to Lucas. "You hear that, Lucas?" Dad said, smiling at him. "Use that 2% angle. That is a smart move, son. You have a great business mind." I just stood there. My chest felt tight, like someone wrapped a heavy rope around my lungs. My own idea, my own hard work, handed to Lucas, again. "I found that angle, Dad," I whispered. My voice shook a little bit. Dad stopped smiling. He turned to me. His face got very hard. He stepped closer. He was much taller than me. "Maya," he said softly, but it felt like a slap. "We are a team. This is a family. Lucas is the face of this company. People trust him. You are good at sitting in the back and typing numbers. Know your place. I am building a future for this family. Do not let your jealousy ruin it." Jealousy. That word made my stomach sick. I was not jealous. I was tired. I was so tired of being the ghost in my own family. My mom, Eleanor, walked in right then. She had a bag of fresh pastries from the bakery down the street. She smiled her perfect, practiced smile. She saw me standing there, looking down at my shoes. She knew what just happened. She always knew. She walked over to me and touched my arm. Her hand felt cold. "Now, Maya," Mom said in a soft, sweet voice. "Don't upset your father today. He has a lot of pressure on him. Come help me put these pastries on a plate for Lucas's meeting." Mom was the enabler. She was the glue that kept the fake perfect picture together. She never shouted. She never hit me. But her soft words were like little cuts. She wanted me to stay quiet so Dad would stay happy. For her, a quiet house was a happy house, even if I was drowning in the silence. I walked to the break room. I put the pastries on a glass plate. My hands were shaking. I looked out the small window. The sky was gray and heavy. I thought about Grandpa George. He died 2 months ago. He He was the only one who ever looked at me and saw me, really saw me. When I was a little girl, Grandpa used to take me to the edge of town, to Snohomish County. He owned a big, ugly piece of land there, 5 acres of wet, muddy swamp. There were only dead trees, thick green moss, and loud frogs. Dad hated that land. He called it George's big mistake. He said it was useless dirt. You couldn't build a house on it. You couldn't farm on it. The water was always too high. But Grandpa loved it. We would sit on the hood of his old truck, eating sandwiches, looking at the muddy water. "Look closely, little bird," Grandpa told me one time. It was the summer of 2004. I was 16. People only see mud, they only see what is on top. But the real power, the real value, is hiding underneath. You just have to know where to dig. You and me, we are like this land. Quiet, but deep. I missed Grandpa so much. He was my only safe place. With him gone, I was completely alone in the Vance family. The clock in the break room ticked loudly. 10 a.m., 10:01 a.m., 10:02 a.m. Every second felt like a heavy stone. I wiped a tear from my eye before it could fall. In this family, tears were a weakness. Dad used them against you. I put on my blank face, my mask. I picked up the plate of pastries and walked into the boardroom. I placed them in front of Lucas. "Thanks, May," Lucas mumbled, already looking at his phone. He didn't even look up. I walked back to my loud, shaky copy machine. I sat down. I pressed my thumb hard against the sharp metal edge of my heavy stapler. Just a little bit, just to feel something real. This was my life. This was the toxic equilibrium, the fake peace. I did all the heavy lifting. Dad took all the control. Mom kept everything looking pretty. And Lucas got all the glory. I thought it would be like this forever. I thought I would just disappear into this dark corner of Vance Logistics. I didn't know that 3 days later, Grandpa George's will was going to be read. I didn't know that my father was about to do something so cruel, it would finally break the rope around my lungs. 3 days later, on Thursday, November 15, 2012, we sat in the fancy office of Harrison and Barnes law firm. It was on the 14th floor of a tall glass building in downtown Seattle. The room smelled like strong coffee and lemon furniture polish. Rain hit the large glass window with a soft tap-tap-tap sound. We sat around a massive dark wooden table. Dad sat at the head of the table. Lucas sat next to him, checking his phone under the table. Mom sat quietly, holding a tissue. I sat at the far end, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Mr. Thomas Harrison, Grandpa's old lawyer, opened a thick brown folder. He cleared his throat. "We are here to read the last will and testament of George Vance," Mr. Harrison said. His voice was dry and tired. I took a deep breath. I was sad, but I also felt a small bit of hope. Back in 2009, when I was 21, the company almost went bankrupt. Fuel prices were too high. I stayed up for 14 nights straight and built a custom software program to map out better truck routes. It saved Vance Logistics over $150,000 that year alone. Grandpa came to my desk, patted my shoulder, and whispered, "I am making sure you get 30% of the company, Maya. You earned it." I put it in writing. I just wanted what I earned. I just wanted to be safe. Mr. Harrison started reading. The house in Bellevue went to Mom. Some old classic cars went to Lucas. Then Mr. Harrison flipped a page. He looked at Dad over his glasses. "Regarding Vance Logistics," the lawyer read, "I leave 100% ownership, all assets, and all voting rights to my son Arthur Vance." My heart stopped. The room felt like all the air was sucked out. 100%? "Wait," I said softly. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. "Mr. Harrison, that can't be right. Grandpa told me, he showed me a draft in 2009. I was supposed to get 30%. Mr. Harrison looked down at the papers. He looked very uncomfortable. "Maya, your grandfather did have that in his 2009 will, but this is an updated amendment. It was signed on September 10, 2012. September 10, my brain worked fast. Grandpa died on September 24. On September 10 he was in St. Jude Hospital, room 412. He was on very heavy painkillers for his bone cancer. He could not even hold a glass of water by himself." I looked at my father. Dad was looking right back at me. He was not ashamed. He looked perfectly calm. "Dad was very confused in his final weeks," my father said in a smooth, serious voice. "But he and I had a long talk. We realized that giving shares to a junior office worker would just confuse the clients. A company needs one strong leader. It is about keeping the family legacy united, Maya. I am doing this to protect the business for all of us." He stole it. While Grandpa was dying in a hospital bed, high on medicine, my father held his hand and made him sign everything away. He did it in the name of family legacy. My stomach turned sick. The betrayal was so heavy it felt like physical pain in my chest. I gave 6 years of my life to that company. I worked weekends. I skipped my own college graduation party to do payroll, all for nothing. Mr. Harrison coughed again. Let us finish. To my granddaughter, Maya Vance, I leave the 5-acre parcel of land in Snohomish County, parcel number 44 and 90. Silence filled the room. Dad leaned back in his big leather chair. He crossed his arms and let out a short, cruel laugh. A sneer twisted his face. A swamp, Dad said, shaking his head. He always knew you were a failure, Maya. He gave you the only thing you are good for, mud. Now you own dirt that costs more in property taxes than it is worth. The county tax on that useless swamp is $2,400 a year. Lucas snickered loudly. Have fun with the frogs, May. Mom leaned forward. Arthur, please, be gentle. She turned to me, offering a fake smile. Maya, sweetie, this is actually a blessing. Now you don't have to stress about the business anymore. You can focus on finding a nice husband. Dad sat forward again. The joke was over. His eyes were cold like ice. Actually, Eleanor is right. Maya, now that I have full legal control of the company, I am restructuring. Lucas is the new vice president, and we don't need a back office clerk anymore. We are hiring a real accounting firm from Chicago. I stared at him. The room started to spin. You are firing me? I asked. My voice was just a whisper. After I built the whole routing system? It is a business decision, Dad said smoothly. He adjusted his expensive silk tie. You don't fit the new corporate image. We need professionals. Your severance pay will be exactly 1 week's salary. Go to the office, clean out your desk by 5 p.m., and leave your key card with the security guard. He didn't just steal my inheritance. He took away my job, my daily life, and my ability to even pay the $2,400 tax on the swamp. He wanted to break me so completely that I would have to beg him for money. He wanted me to be a helpless victim forever. I looked at Lucas, who was smiling at his phone. I looked at Mom, who was fixing her lipstick in a small mirror. I looked at Dad, who looked like a king who just won a war. And suddenly, the pain stopped. The tight rope around my lungs snapped. The fear of making Dad angry vanished. The desperate need for his love just died. Right there in the cold lawyer's office, my father killed the scared little girl inside me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a tantrum. Realizing that your family is your enemy is a very quiet feeling. It is like stepping off a cliff and realizing you don't care about hitting the ground anymore. I stood up. I picked up the heavy black pen from the table. Where do I sign to claim the deed? I asked Mr. Harrison. My voice was completely flat. My hands were no longer shaking. Mr. Harrison looked surprised. He pointed to a line at the bottom of the last page. I signed my name carefully. Maya Vance. Dad frowned. He wanted me to cry. He wanted me to beg him to keep my job. My silence made him nervous. Don't expect any handouts from me when the tax bill comes, Maya, Dad warned. His voice was sharper now. I didn't answer him. I didn't even look at him. I put the pen down. I picked up my cheap coat. I gave Mr. Harrison a small, polite nod. Then, I just smiled a small, tired smile, and I walked out of the room. I closed the heavy oak door behind me, leaving them in their toxic little circle. I was officially unemployed. I had $800 in my checking account. I owned 5 acres of dead swamp that I couldn't afford. But as I rode the elevator down to the street, listening to the soft hum of the machine, I realized something important. I was finally free. And Grandpa George was a very smart man. He didn't leave me mud because he hated me. He left me mud because he knew something they didn't. I just had to find out what it was. I walked back into the Vance Logistics office at 4 p.m. The rain outside was pouring harder now. My wet shoes made a squeaking sound on the gray carpet. I grabbed an empty brown cardboard box from the supply room. It smelled like old dust and cheap tape. I walked to my desk in the back corner and started putting my life into it. My favorite pen, my cracked white coffee mug, the small green plant I kept alive for 3 years. Suddenly, I smelled heavy rose perfume. It was Aunt Clara. She was Dad's older sister and the head of human resources. Aunt Clara looked around to make sure Dad was not watching. She walked over to my desk quickly. She looked nervous. Her hands were playing with her pearl necklace. Maya, honey, Aunt Clara whispered. Her voice was shaking a little. I am so sorry about what happened today. I really am. I stopped packing. I looked at her. You knew, didn't you? I asked. My voice was calm, but my chest hurt. You are the head of HR. You knew he was firing me. Aunt Clara looked down at the floor. She could not look me in the eye. Maya, your dad is a very difficult man. He makes the rules. He told me about the new will 2 weeks ago. I saw him changing the company files to remove your name. 2 weeks ago. The words felt like dry dirt in my mouth. And you didn't warn me. You let me work until 3 a.m. last night, knowing I was already fired? Aunt Clara reached into her expensive leather purse. She pulled out an envelope and tried to push it into my hand. I have to pay my own mortgage, Maya. If I make him angry, he will fire me too. You know how he gets? She said, her eyes begging me to understand. Look, here is $500 from my own bank account, just to help you for a few weeks. Please take it, but do not tell your dad. I looked at the envelope. This was how my family worked. They watched you bleed, and then they offered you a band-aid in the dark so they could feel like good people. They were enablers. They stayed quiet to protect their own comfortable lives while the villain destroyed someone else. I did not take the envelope. Keep your money, Aunt Clara, I said quietly. You need it more than I do, because you have to buy a new soul. I picked up my box, turned my back on her, and walked out of the building. I didn't look back. The next morning, Friday, November 16th, I woke up in my tiny cold apartment. I made a cup of cheap black coffee. I sat at my small kitchen table and looked at the single piece of paper I got from the lawyer. The deed to parcel 44-890, the 5-acre swamp. Dad said the county taxes on it were $2,400 a year. I only had $800 in the bank. I needed to figure out how to sell this mud, or the government would take it away from me soon. I remembered Grandpa's words again. The real power, the real value, is hiding underneath. I took the bus to the Snohomish County zoning office. The building was old. It smelled like wet floor cleaner and stale coffee. The fluorescent lights on the ceiling buzzed loudly. I walked up to desk 4. A tired, older man with thick glasses was typing on a very old computer. His name tag said Mr. Henderson. Excuse me, I said. I slid my deed across the counter. I just inherited this land, parcel 44-890. I need to know why the property tax is so high for a piece of unbuildable swamp. Mr. Henderson sighed. He picked up the paper, adjusted his glasses, and typed the number into his computer. He clicked his mouse a few times. Suddenly he stopped. He looked closely at the screen. Then he looked up at me. His eyes were wide open with surprise. You are Maya Vance? He asked. Yes, I nodded. Well, Miss Vance, Mr. Henderson said slowly. He turned his computer monitor around so I could see the map. You are right. You cannot build a house on this 5-acre land. It is a protected wetland. But, did you look at who owns the land right next to you? I leaned closer to the screen. The map showed my little blue square of swamp. Right next to it was a massive, 50-acre red square. The red square is owned by Vance Logistics, Mr. Henderson explained. Your family's company. Yes, Dad bought that land last year, I said. He is planning to build a massive new mega warehouse there for a $15 million contract with Miller Industries. But what does that have to do with my swamp? Mr. Henderson leaned forward. He pointed a thick finger at my blue square. Because of the county's strict environmental laws, Miss Vance, you cannot pour 50 acres of solid concrete without a place for the heavy rainwater to drain. If there is no natural drainage, the warehouse will flood the local roads. It is illegal. My heart started to beat a little faster. Okay. 2 months ago, Mr. Henderson continued, his voice dropping low, your grandfather filed a special zoning restriction. He locked the commercial drainage rights exclusively to your 5-acre parcel. He paused, making sure I understood the legal reality. Ms. Vance, your father can build his giant warehouse, but legally, he cannot open the doors. He cannot get an operating permit, unless the water runoff drains directly into your swamp, and he cannot touch your swamp without your legal written permission. I stared at the glowing map on the screen. The buzzing sound of the lights faded away. Grandpa knew Dad was going to try and take everything. He knew Dad wanted to be a king. So Grandpa didn't just leave me a piece of mud. He left me the key to Dad's entire kingdom. Without my useless dirt, Dad's multi-million-dollar Miller deal was dead. His mega warehouse was just an expensive, useless concrete block. Dad thought he was the smartest man in the room, but Grandpa had set a legal trap for him right under his feet. A slow, deep feeling of power rushed into my blood. The scared, silent girl who cried over a cracked coffee mug was gone. I was not the victim anymore. Mr. Henderson, I asked, my voice steady and cold. How much can a private landowner charge a corporation for commercial drainage rights? Mr. Henderson smiled a little. Whatever the corporation is willing to pay to save their business, Miss Vance. You hold all the cards. I thanked him and walked out of the zoning office. The rain had stopped. The air felt fresh and clean. I was unemployed and my family hated me. But for the first time in my life, I was holding the steering wheel. I was not going to sell the land. I was going to wait. I was going to let Dad build his shiny new warehouse. I was going to let him spend millions of dollars. And then, I was going to watch him hit a brick wall. The next 3 years were the hardest of my life. From late 2012 to the end of 2015, I lived in total exile from my family. I didn't see my mother. I didn't hear from my brother. I certainly didn't talk to my father. They had cut me out like an infection, and I let them. My plan was simple, but executing it required absolute patience. I had to pay the $2,400 annual tax on parcel 44-890. If I missed a single payment, the county could seize the land, and my father would buy it for pennies. To keep my swamp, I needed cash, fast. In January 2013, I got a job working the night shift at a cheap motel near the highway. I sat behind bulletproof glass from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., dealing with drunk drivers and angry travelers. The pay was low, but I could study during the quiet hours. During the day, I took online courses in logistics and supply chain management. I slept for 4 hours a day on a terrible mattress that hurt my back. Some nights I would wake up in a cold sweat, thinking I heard my father yelling at me for a missing file. The trauma of the toxic equilibrium didn't just disappear because I left the building, it haunted me. But every time I wanted to give up, I thought about the zoning map, the blue square and the red square. In the spring of 2014, my life changed. I was at the public library, studying a thick book on commercial shipping rates. A woman sat at the table across from me. She was older, maybe 50, with sharp gray eyes and a neat bun. She had a pile of messy spreadsheets in front of her. She looked incredibly frustrated. She slammed her pen down. "This routing algorithm is garbage," she muttered to herself. I couldn't help it. "If you are trying to route multiple trucks across state lines, you can't use standard mileage," I said quietly, without looking up from my book. "You have to factor in union driver rest mandates and state toll variables. Otherwise, your margins shrink by 3%. She stopped. She looked at me closely. "And how does a girl studying at a public library on a Tuesday afternoon know that?" "I built a routing system that saved a company $150,000 in 1 year, I told her honestly, before they fired me. Her name was Sarah Jenkins. She owned Jenkins Freight, a mid-sized competitor to my father's company. She was tough, fair, and desperately needed someone who understood the back end of logistics. She offered me a job right there in the library. Sarah became my mentor. She was the mother my own mother refused to be. She didn't offer fake smiles or try to keep me quiet. She pushed me to be loud. She taught me how to negotiate with angry truckers, how to read contracts, and how to spot a bad deal from a mile away. "Business is bloodless, Maya," Sarah told me one evening in November 2015. We were sharing a cheap pizza in her office. "Emotions make you stupid. You look at the math never lies." She was right. And the math on my father's mega warehouse was starting to look very interesting. Through industry rumors and public building permits, I kept track of Dad's progress. It took him 2 years to get the funding, mostly through heavy bank loans based on the promised Miller Industries contract. By early 2015, construction finally started on his 50-acre site. He was pouring concrete, he was putting up steel beams, he was spending millions. He was so arrogant, so sure of his own power, that he never bothered to check the fine print of the environmental drainage codes. He assumed that because he owned the big land, the small land around it didn't matter. He thought he was untouchable. By December 2015, the massive Vance Logistics mega warehouse was finished. It was a beautiful, terrifying building. And then, the county inspector came. I was sitting in my new comfortable office at Jenkins Freight on a cold Tuesday morning. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. 10 minutes later, I checked the message. "Maya, this is your father." His voice was tight, like a coiled spring. He wasn't yelling, but the anger was thick. "We have a minor zoning issue. I need you to sign a standard utility waiver for parcel 44-890. I will give you $5,000 for your trouble. Come to my office at noon." I listened to the message twice. I felt a cold, hard smile spread across my face. A minor zoning issue. He meant the county just denied his operating permit. He meant his multi-million-dollar warehouse was legally barred from opening. He meant he was bleeding thousands of dollars a day in interest payments on his bank loans, and he couldn't move a single truck. He offered me $5,000. He still thought I was the desperate girl sitting in the back corner. I didn't call him back. I didn't go to his office. I went to Sarah instead. I told her everything, about the will, the swamp, the drainage rights, and the trap Grandpa built. I showed her the zoning maps and the county regulations, Sarah sat back in her chair, staring at the papers. A slow grin appeared on her face. "Maya," she said, her voice filled with deep respect. "Your father is standing on a landmine, and you are holding the detonator." "I am not signing his waiver for $5,000, I said firmly. "Of course not," Sarah replied, standing up. "You are going to hire the meanest corporate lawyer in Seattle, and then, you are going to let your father bleed." The exile was over. It was time for the reckoning. I ignored my father's voicemail. I ignored his 10 text messages over the next 3 weeks. I let him sit in his expensive, useless 50-acre concrete box and panic. Then, on Monday, January 11th, 2016, a thick, expensive black envelope arrived at my office. It was an invitation. Vance Logistics 30th Anniversary and Mega Warehouse Unveiling Gala. Saturday, January 16, 2016, 7 p.m. The Emerald Ballroom, downtown Seattle. Inside the envelope was a handwritten note from my mother. "Maya, please come. Your father is very stressed. It is time to be a family again. He has a paper for you to sign. Don't make a scene. Love, Mom." She still thought I was the same girl she could control with a soft, fake smile. She thought I would walk into a room full of powerful people and shrink away. They wanted a public gathering because Dad thought the pressure of the crowd would force me to obey him. He wanted to look like the generous king forgiving his silly daughter. I decided to go, but I did not go alone. I brought the heavy, sharp legal contract my new lawyer, Mr. Sterling, had drafted for me. On Saturday night at 7:30 p.m., I walked into the Emerald Ballroom. I was not wearing my old cheap coat. I wore a tailored dark navy blue suit. My hair was pulled back tight. I felt calm. The fear that used to live in my chest was completely gone. The room was huge and bright. There were large crystal chandeliers on the ceiling. Waiters carried silver trays of champagne. A jazz band played softly in the corner. I saw Aunt Clara standing near the ice sculpture, wearing too much perfume. I saw Lucas laughing loudly by the bar, holding a drink, pretending he was an important businessman. And then I saw my father. He was sitting at the main VIP table in the center of the room. He was sitting with Mr. David Miller, the CEO of Miller Industries. The $15 million contract depended on Mr. Miller. Mom was sitting next to Dad, wearing a heavy diamond necklace. I walked straight to the VIP table. My shoes clicked sharply on the hard marble floor. Dad saw me coming. He put on his perfect fake smile. He stood up and opened his arms wide so everyone could see. "Maya, my daughter," Dad said loudly. Several people turned to look. "I am so glad you came home to celebrate our family's great success." He pulled out an empty chair next to him. I sat down. The smell of roasted beef and expensive wine filled the air. "Hello, Dad," I said quietly. I did not smile. Dad leaned in close to me. His fake smile stayed on his face, but his voice dropped to an angry whisper. "I have the utility waiver right here in my pocket, Maya. Sign it now. Mr. Miller wants to start moving his cargo into the new warehouse on Monday. Do not play games with me tonight." I looked across the table. Mr. Miller was watching us. He looked confused. "Is there a problem with the new warehouse, Arthur?" Mr. Miller asked. "I need my trucks rolling by 6 a.m. on Monday. I cannot afford delays." Dad waved his hand, forcing a laugh. No, David. Just a tiny paperwork thing with the county. My daughter here owns a small piece of old land nearby. Just crossing the T's and dotting the I's." Dad slid a folded white paper under the table onto my lap. He also slid a pen. "Sign it," he whispered through his teeth. "I am doing this for the family. Do not ruin our legacy." I looked at him. I remembered the day in the lawyer's office when he took everything from me. I remembered his cruel laugh. "You didn't do it for the family, Dad," I said. My voice was clear and cold. I did not whisper. I spoke loud enough for Mr. Miller and the whole table to hear. "You did it for yourself." The table went completely silent. Mom gasped and put her hand over her mouth. Lucas stopped walking toward the table and just stared. "Maya, shut your mouth," Dad hissed, his face turning red. The fake smile finally fell off. I reached into my bag and pulled out my own thick legal folder. I placed it right on top of the dinner plates, right in front of Mr. Miller. "Mr. Miller," I said calmly, "my father is lying to you. He does not have a tiny paperwork issue. He was denied his legal operating permit by the county. His new mega warehouse has 0 drainage rights. If you move your cargo there on Monday, the city will shut it down, and your goods will be locked inside by the government." Mr. Miller's face turned pale. He looked at my dad. "Arthur, is she telling the truth?" Dad was sweating now. Tiny drops of water formed on his forehead. "David, please, she is just a bitter child. She is upset because I fired her. I own the 5-acre wetland surrounding his warehouse, I interrupted, my voice perfectly smooth. By law, he cannot drain a single drop of rainwater without my signature. Without me, his $15 million building is a useless brick in the mud, and I am not giving him the rights for free. Aunt Clara dropped her champagne glass. It shattered on the floor with a loud crash, but nobody moved. The enablers were finally seeing the truth. The great Arthur Vance was not a king. He was trapped. Dad slammed his fist on the table. The silver forks jumped. You ungrateful brat, after everything I gave you, I will take you to court. I will crush you. You can try, I said, leaning forward, but every day we spend in court, your bank loans grow. You are bleeding $10,000 a day in interest, Dad. By the time a judge hears this, you will be bankrupt. I pushed my folder toward him. This is my offer, I said. You will pay me $2 million for a permanent drainage easement. And, as Grandpa originally wanted, you will legally transfer 30% of Vance Logistics back into my name. Dad stared at the paper like it was a poisonous snake. His hands were shaking. The powerful, scary man who controlled my whole life suddenly looked like a very small, very weak old man. I won't do it, Dad choked out. I will never give you my company. Then the warehouse stays dead, I said. I stood up from the table. I looked at Mr. Miller. If he doesn't sign by midnight, Mr. Miller, I suggest you call Jenkins Freight. We would love to handle your shipping contract. I didn't wait for Dad to scream or Mom to cry. I turned around and walked toward the exit. The heavy doors of the ballroom were open. The cool night air was waiting for me. The heavy glass doors of the Emerald Ballroom closed behind me. The loud jazz music and the warm smell of roasted beef were instantly gone. The cold Seattle wind hit my face. It was 8:45 p.m. I walked across the dark parking lot to my old silver Honda Civic. I unlocked the door, sat in the driver's seat, and locked it again. For a full minute, I just sat there in the dark. And then, my body reacted. My hands started shaking so badly I could not put the key into the ignition. My breathing got fast and shallow. In movies, when the hero stands up to the villain, they just walk away looking cool and calm. But real life is not polished. Real life is messy. Standing up to your abuser, especially when it is your own father, takes a massive physical toll. My brain knew I was safe, but my body felt like it had just run out of a burning building. I rested my forehead against the cold steering wheel. I closed my eyes and took slow, deep breaths. 1, 2, 3. I was not the scared little girl anymore. I was holding the detonator. I just had to wait for the explosion. The next morning was Sunday, January 17, 2016. The sky was pale and cloudy. I sat in the small conference room at Jenkins Freight. Sarah was pouring hot black coffee into 2 mugs. The room smelled like roasted beans and old paper. My lawyer, Mr. William Sterling, sat across from me. He was a quiet, sharp man in his 50s who always wore simple gray suits. He did not play games. Mr. Sterling opened his brown leather briefcase and pulled out a thin piece of paper. He slid it across the table to me. Your father's lawyers sent this to my office at 7 a.m. this morning, Mr. Sterling said. His voice was calm. It is a cease and desist letter. They are threatening to sue you for extortion and emotional distress. They are demanding you sign the utility waiver immediately, or they will take you to federal court. I looked at the formal paper. The legal words looked scary. Extortion, federal court. For a second, a tiny drop of my old fear came back. Sarah put a mug of coffee in front of me. She tapped the paper with her finger. Don't let the fancy words scare you, Maya. Read the subtext. I looked at Mr. Sterling. Can they actually take my land? Mr. Sterling took a sip of his coffee. He smiled a very small smile. Maya, in the legal world, a threat letter sent on a Sunday morning means only one thing: total panic. They have no case. The law is 100% on your side. Grandpa George's deed is unbreakable. They are just trying to bully you because they know they are trapped. Your father's company does not have the cash for a long legal fight. He is bluffing. Before I could answer, my cell phone started buzzing on the table. I looked at the screen. The caller ID said Lucas. My brother had not called me in 3 years, not on my birthday, not on Christmas. But now, less than 12 hours after I ruined their party, he was calling. I looked at Sarah and Mr. Sterling. Sarah nodded. I took a deep breath, pressed accept, and put the phone on speaker mode. Hello, Lucas, I said. My voice was steady. Maya. Oh, thank God you answered, Lucas said. His voice sounded thick, like he was crying, or pretending to cry. Listen, May, you have to come to Seattle General Hospital right now. My heart did a quick jump. Hospital? Why? It's Dad, Lucas said, sounding desperate. He collapsed last night after you left. His blood pressure went through the roof. The doctors say it's a minor heart incident. He is under so much stress, Maya. You are killing him. Is this what you want? Do you want our father to die over some stupid swamp mud? There it was, the ultimate weapon of a toxic family, guilt. When force doesn't work, they use your empathy against you. They make you the villain. They make you feel responsible for their pain, even though they caused the whole mess. For a few seconds, the old Maya wanted to rush to the hospital. She wanted to apologize and fix everything. But I looked at the old crack in my phone screen. I remembered my cracked coffee mug. I remembered how Dad laughed at me in the lawyer's office. I remembered how Lucas told me to go have fun with the frogs. I closed my eyes and listened carefully to the background noise on the phone call. I heard a loud ding. I heard a voice say, "Venti caramel macchiato for Dave." He wasn't at the hospital. He was at a Starbucks. A cold wave of clarity washed over me. He was lying. He just wanted to scare me into dropping my demands because without the warehouse, his fancy vice president job and his big salary were gone. "Lucas," I said softly. "Please, May," Lucas begged. "Just email the waiver. Do it for Dad's health." "Lucas, which room number is he in?" I asked. There was a short pause. Room 314, ICU. "That's interesting," I replied, my voice turning icy. "Because I can hear the barista calling out a coffee order behind you. Tell Dad that drinking a venti macchiato is bad for his blood pressure." Total silence on the other end of the line. He knew he was caught. "My offer stands," I said firmly. $2 million and 30% of the company. The deadline is tomorrow at 5 p.m. After that, the price goes up. I reached out and pressed the red button to end the call. I looked up at Sarah and Mr. Sterling. My hands were not shaking anymore. The mask of my toxic family was completely broken, and I could finally see them for exactly what they were: weak, desperate people who only cared about money. The first boundary was set. They could not manipulate my emotions anymore. Now, it was just a game of numbers, and Dad was running out of time. Monday, January 18th, 2016, the deadline day. Outside my window at Jenkins Freight, the Seattle rain was falling in a light gray mist. Inside, the office was warm and busy. Phones were ringing. The printers were humming. I sat at my desk, looking at my computer screen. It was 10 a.m. I had exactly 7 hours until my 5 p.m. deadline. My phone was quiet. No calls from Dad. No fake emergencies from Lucas. "They are waiting," Sarah said. She walked past my desk and dropped a file in front of me. "In business, the person who speaks first is usually the person who loses. He wants you to get nervous and call him." "I am not calling him," I said. I took a sip of my coffee. It tasted strong and bitter. I liked it. At 11:30 a.m., the phone on my desk finally beeped. It was the receptionist from the front lobby. "Maya," the receptionist said, "there is a woman here to see you. She says she is your mother. Her name is Eleanor Vance." My stomach tightened. I did not expect Mom. Dad always fought his own battles. Sending Mom meant he was trying a new psychological trick. "Send her back to the break room, please," I said. I walked into the break room. It was a simple room with white walls, a cheap microwave, and a plastic table. Mom stood in the middle of the room. She looked out of place. She wore a long, expensive tan coat and holding a designer leather handbag. But when I looked closely, her perfect mask was slipping. She had dark circles under her eyes. Her hands were gripping her bag very tightly. Her beautiful diamond ring was tapping nervously against the leather. "Hello, Mom," I said calmly. I did not step closer to hug her. "Maya," she breathed out. She looked around the cheap break room with a small look of disgust. "Look at this place. Look at how you are living. You don't have to do this, sweetie." "I like my job, Mom," I said. "Why are you here?" She sat down on one of the hard plastic chairs. She looked up at me, and her eyes filled with real tears. This was not a trick like Lucas's phone call. She was genuinely terrified. But she was not terrified for me. She was terrified for her comfortable life. "Your father did not sleep all weekend," Mom said softly. Her voice was shaking. "He is pacing around the house. He is drinking too much whiskey. Maya, the bank called him this morning. Pacific First Bank. They hold the commercial bridge loan for the warehouse." I sat down across from her. I kept my face blank, but my mind was working fast. And his monthly interest payment of $250,000 is due this Friday," she whispered, leaning forward. "If the warehouse does not get its operating permit by Wednesday, the bank will freeze his business accounts. The Miller contract will be canceled. We will lose our house, Maya. Lucas will lose his job. We will lose everything." She reached across the table and tried to hold my hand. I slowly pulled my hand back and put it in my lap. "I am sorry to hear that, Mom," I said gently. "But Dad should have checked the zoning laws before he spent $15 million. Mom's face changed. The sad, crying mother disappeared. The angry enabler came out. "How can you be so cold?" she snapped. Her voice got a little louder. "He is your father. He gave you food. He gave you a home. Family is supposed to help each other. You are ruining us over some old dirty swamp." "No, Mom," I said. I looked right into her eyes. "I am not ruining you. Dad's pride is ruining you. I worked for him for 6 years. I built his systems. And when Grandpa left me 30% of the company, Dad stole it while Grandpa was dying in a hospital bed. Then, he fired me and threw me away." He laughed at me. I paused. The room was totally quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. "Where was your speech about family then, Mom?" I asked quietly. "When he left me with $800 and no job, did you tell him he was ruining me?" "No. You gave me a fake smile and told me to find a husband." Mom stared at me. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She could not argue with the truth. Real-life villains and their enablers always believe their own lies. When you hold up a mirror to them, they do not know what to do. She stood up. She wiped her eyes. Her face was hard and cold now. "You are just like your Grandpa George," Mom said bitterly, stubborn and cruel. "You will die alone with your money, Maya." "I would rather be alone than sit at a table with thieves," I replied smoothly. Mom turned around and walked out of the break room. The heavy door clicked shut behind her. I sat there for a few minutes. I felt a deep, heavy grief in my chest. It was the pain of finally accepting that I never really had a mother. I had a woman who birthed me, but her loyalty was only to Dad's money. I took a deep breath, letting the pain wash over me, and then I let it go. The grief was real, but it did not control me anymore. I went back to my desk. The clock said 1 p.m. At exactly 3:45 p.m., my cell phone rang. It was Mr. Sterling, my lawyer. "Hello, Maya," Mr. Sterling said. I could hear the sound of typing in the background. "I just got a call from your father's chief legal counsel. They are done playing games. They know the bank will destroy them on Friday." "Are they agreeing to my terms?" I asked. My heart started to beat a little faster. "Almost," Mr. Sterling said smoothly. "They want an emergency meeting. Today at 4:30 p.m., at their downtown office. They are bringing the contract for the $2 million and the 30% equity transfer." I leaned back in my chair. "Is there a catch?" "There is always a catch with Arthur Vance," Mr. Sterling replied. "He told his lawyers he will sign everything, but only if you come alone. He does not want me there. He says this is a family matter, and he wants to look you in the eye when he signs it." Sarah was standing near my desk, listening. I looked at her. She shook her head silently, mouthing the word no. Going into the villain's territory alone was dangerous. Dad wanted me back in his office, in his big chair, where he felt powerful. He wanted to try one last time to break me. "Tell him yes," I told Mr. Sterling. "Maya, as your lawyer, I highly advise against going without me," Mr. Sterling warned. "He might try to pressure you into signing a different paper." "He can't pressure me anymore," I said softly. "I know exactly who he is. Have the final contracts ready, Mr. Sterling. I will go get his signature." I hung up the phone. It was time to go back to the place where my nightmare started. But this time, I was the one bringing the storm. I parked my silver Honda Civic outside the main building of Vance Logistics at 4:15 p.m. The rain was falling harder now. The sky was a dark, bruised purple. I turned off the engine and listened to the rain hitting the roof of my car. I looked up at the big, glowing blue sign, Vance Logistics. For 6 years, that sign made my stomach hurt. It was a symbol of my cage. Today, it just looked like a cheap piece of plastic. I walked through the front glass doors. The lobby smelled exactly the same. Floor wax, old coffee, and cold air conditioning. The new security guard did not know me. He just nodded when I said I had a 4:30 p.m. appointment with Arthur Vance. I walked past the front offices. Lucas's big glass office was empty. The lights were off. He was hiding. That was typical Lucas. When the ship was sinking, the golden child always ran away first. I walked toward the back of the building. I passed my old corner. The heavy, loud copy machine was still there. A young boy, maybe 20 years old, was sitting in my old plastic chair. He looked tired and stressed. There was a mountain of blue folders on his desk. My chest felt a quick, sharp ache. Not for me, but for him. He was the new scapegoat. He was the new ghost. I did not stop. I walked straight to the heavy oak door at the end of the hall. Arthur Vance, President and CEO. I opened the door without knocking. It was 4:25 p.m. My father was sitting behind his massive mahogany desk. He did not look like a king anymore. He looked like an old, tired man. He was wearing the same dark blue suit from the party, but it was wrinkled. His tie was pulled loose. His face was gray, and there were deep dark bags under his eyes. There was a half-empty bottle of cheap pink antacid medicine on his desk, right next to a pile of messy bank papers. He looked up when I walked in. His eyes were red. "Close the door, Maya," Dad said. His voice was rough, like he had been shouting for hours. I pushed the heavy oak door shut. It clicked. I walked over and sat in one of the leather chairs across from him. I put my black bag on my lap. I did not say a word. I just waited. Sarah taught me that. Let the desperate person fill the silence. Dad picked up a silver pen. He rolled it between his fingers. His hands were shaking. "You think you are very smart, don't you?" Dad said bitterly. "You think you beat me, my own flesh and blood, teaming up with Jenkins Freight to destroy your own family's legacy." "I am not trying to destroy anything, Dad," I said calmly. My voice was completely flat. "I am just selling a piece of real estate. You need it. I have it. It is just business. You taught me that." Dad slammed his hand on the desk. The bottle of pink medicine shook. "Do not use my own words against me," he yelled. The old scary anger flashed in his eyes. He leaned over the desk, trying to use his size to scare me. "I built this company from nothing. I worked 80 hours a week. Grandpa George just drove a single truck. I made this an empire, and you want to steal 30% of it without doing any of the hard work?" I felt a tiny ghost of my old fear try to crawl up my throat. My body remembered the years of his yelling, but I looked at his shaking hands. I looked at the fear hiding behind his loud voice. I swallowed my old fear down. It tasted like nothing. "I did the hard work," I answered quietly. "I built the routing software. I did the payroll. I saved this company from bankruptcy in 2009 while Lucas played golf. Grandpa knew it. That is why he left me the shares. You stole them. I am just taking them back." Dad stared at me. He breathed heavily. He realized yelling was not going to work. The aggressive animal inside him backed down. He slowly sank back into his big leather chair. He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick legal folder. He pushed it across the smooth wood of the desk toward me. "Okay, Maya, let's make a deal," Dad said. His voice suddenly became soft and smooth. The manipulative father was back. "I talked to the bank. I can get you $3 million in cash for the permanent drainage rights. $3 million, Maya. You can buy a beautiful house. You can travel the world. You will never have to work a night shift at a dirty motel again." He tapped the folder with his silver pen. "Just sign this paper. Take the $3 million. But you do not get 30% of my company. I will not share my board of directors with you. Take the cash and walk away. That is my final, best offer." I looked at the folder. $3 million was a lot of money. It was more than I asked for. Dad was trying to buy my pride. He was trying to buy my silence. He would rather go deeper into debt with the bank than admit I was his equal in the company. I looked up at the clock on the wall. The red second hand ticked loudly. Tick, tick, tick. It was 4:45 p.m., 15 minutes left. I reached into my black bag. I pulled out my own folder, the one Mr. Sterling prepared. I placed it directly on top of Dad's $3 million offer. "No," I said simply. Dad's smooth face cracked. "What do you mean no? Are you crazy? It is an extra $1 million. I am giving you a gift." "I don't want your gifts," I said. "I want my 30%. I want my name on the company charter. Because this isn't just about money, Dad. This is about respect. You are going to sign my contract or I am walking out that door." Dad laughed, but it was a dry, hollow sound. "You won't walk away. You are too greedy." "It's 4:48 p.m., Dad," I said, pointing at the clock. "At 5 p.m. I am leaving. Tomorrow Pacific First Bank will freeze your accounts because you missed your $250,000 interest payment. On Wednesday, the county will officially lock the warehouse doors. On Friday, Mr. Miller will cancel his $15 million contract. And by next Monday, Vance Logistics will be completely bankrupt. The bank will take 100% of your company." I leaned forward. I looked directly into his red, tired eyes. "So Dad, here is the math. You can give me 30% today and save the other 70% for yourself. Or, you can give the bank 100% on Friday and you will have nothing. 30% of something is better than 100% of nothing. Your choice." Total silence filled the room. The only sound was the heavy rain hitting the glass window behind him. Dad looked at my face. He was looking for any sign of weakness. He was looking for the little girl who used to cry when he ignored her. But that girl was dead. He only saw a mirror of his own cold logic staring back at him. He realized he had no power left. The illusion was broken. The clock ticked. 4:55 p.m. Dad let out a long, shaky breath. It sounded like a balloon losing all its air. His shoulders dropped. He looked old. Very, very old. Without looking at me, he picked up his silver pen. He opened my folder. He flipped to the last page. His hand was shaking so badly he had to press the pen down hard to control it. He signed his name, Arthur Vance. He pushed the folder back to me. He did not say a word. He just turned his chair around to look out the window at the dark, rainy city. I closed the folder and put it in my bag. I stood up. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I just felt clean. The toxic poison was finally out of my system. "Goodbye, Arthur," I said. I turned around, opened the heavy oak door, and walked out into the hallway. The deal was done. The swamp was safe, the money was secured, and I owned 30% of his empire. But the hardest part of a family drama isn't winning the war. It's figuring out how to live in the peace that comes after. I walked out of the Vance Logistics building and back to my car. The heavy Seattle rain had finally stopped. The streetlights reflected on the wet black road. I got into my silver Honda Civic, locked the doors, and drove home. When I unlocked my small apartment, it was completely quiet. I didn't celebrate. I didn't open a bottle of champagne. I took off my wet coat, lay down on my cheap mattress, and slept for 14 straight hours. It was a deep, heavy sleep. For the first time in 24 years, my brain was not scanning the room for danger. The next morning was Tuesday, January 19th, 2016. I was sitting in Mr. Sterling's office by 9 a.m. Mr. Sterling took the thick legal folder from my hands. He put on his reading glasses and carefully checked my father's signature on the last page. He ran his finger over the ink. "It is real," Mr. Sterling said softly. He looked up at me with a look of deep respect. He signed it. "The 30% equity transfer is legally binding. I will file this with the state corporate registry today." I reached into my bag and pulled out the small white county utility waiver. I signed my name at the bottom. I pushed it across the desk. "Email this to the county zoning office," I said, "and email a copy to Pacific First Bank. Let Dad have his mega warehouse. He is going to need it to pay me my dividends." By Friday afternoon, the $2 million hit my bank account. I sat at my computer and stared at the screen. $2,000 and $850. When you grow up poor or controlled, you think $1 million will feel like magic. You think it will suddenly make you happy or erase all your bad memories. But it doesn't. Looking at those numbers, my heart did not race. I just felt a very long, very deep exhale. The money was not a magic wand. It was a thick, steel wall. It meant my father could never starve me again. It meant I was safe. 3 weeks later, on Wednesday, February 10th, 2016, Vance Logistics held its first quarterly board meeting of the year. I did not work in the back corner anymore. I was not an employee. I was a 30% shareholder and a voting board member. I drove to the main office in a new, quiet sedan. I wore a sharp gray suit. I walked into the big glass boardroom at exactly 10 a.m. The room smelled like fresh coffee and expensive leather. Dad was sitting at the head of the table. He looked older. The deep bags under his eyes were darker. Lucas was sitting on his right side, tapping his expensive gold pen nervously against his notebook. Aunt Clara, who was the HR director, sat quietly at the end of the table. When I walked in, the room went dead silent. The tapping of Lucas's pen stopped. I did not sit at the far end of the table like a scared child. I pulled out the heavy leather chair directly on Dad's left side, the seat of equal power. I sat down, opened my laptop, and looked at them. "Good morning," I said calmly. Lucas tried to force a friendly fake smile. He leaned forward. "Hey May, it's really good to see you. Mom misses you. We should all get dinner this weekend, as a family." This was the enabler's trap. Now that I had power, they wanted to pretend the last 3 years of exile never happened. They wanted to use the word family to erase the betrayal. I looked at Lucas. I did not smile back. "My name is Maya, Lucas," I said, my voice perfectly flat and professional. "And we are not here to discuss dinner. We are here to discuss the Q1 shipping margins. Please open your folder to page 4. Lucas blinked. His fake smile slowly melted away. He looked at Dad for help. Dad cleared his throat. He tried to puff up his chest and look like the king again. "Maya, your brother is just trying to be nice. We signed your papers. You got your money. Now let us act like civilized people. We are a family business." "No, Arthur," I said. I used his first name. I saw his eyes widen in shock. "We are a corporate entity, and as a 30% shareholder, I have been reviewing the payroll logs from the last 2 years." I turned my laptop screen so everyone could see it. It showed a bright red graph. "Lucas," I continued, looking right at my brother. "As vice president, your department has lost 8% in profit efficiency. You have been approving overtime pay for drivers without checking their actual GPS logs. You are bleeding money because you do not know how to read the software. That is a lie," Lucas said loudly, his face turning red. "I am out there building client relationships. You just sit behind a screen. You don't understand how the real world works." "The math never lies, Lucas," I said. I remembered Sarah's words. "I am officially calling for a third-party audit of the Vice President's department. If the audit shows gross incompetence, I will use my board voting rights to call for your removal from the VP position." Aunt Clara gasped quietly. Dad slammed his hand flat on the table. "You will do no such thing," Dad yelled. "He is your brother. He is my son. You are tearing this family apart for your own ego. You are a cold, selfish girl." There it was, the real-life villain. Even after he stole from his dying father, fired his own daughter, and tried to ruin my life, he still believed I was the bad guy. He believed he was the victim. I closed my laptop with a soft click. "Biology does not give you the right to be bad at your job, Lucas," I said quietly. I looked at Dad. "And biology does not give you the right to steal, Arthur. I am not tearing a family apart. I am protecting my financial investment from bad management. If you want to keep your titles, you will do your jobs properly, because I will be watching every single penny." I stood up. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to throw anything. True power does not need to shout. "The audit begins on Monday," I said. "Have a productive day, gentlemen." I walked out of the boardroom. I could hear Dad yelling at Lucas before the door even closed. The toxic equilibrium was broken forever. They were turning on each other now. I drove away from the building. I drove straight to Jenkins Freight. When I walked into Sarah's office, she was eating a sandwich and looking at a map. She looked up and smiled. A real, warm smile. "How was the board meeting, Miss Vance?" Sarah asked. "It was very quiet," I smiled back. I sat down across from her. I realized something profound at that moment. Blood is just an accident of birth. True family is built on loyalty, respect, and safety. Sarah had protected me. Mr. Sterling had defended me. Grandpa George had planned for my future. They were my family. The boundaries were finally set. The ghosts were gone. I was ready to live. Time is a very quiet judge. It does not yell, it just waits. 5 years passed. It was now March 2021. I was 33 years old. A lot of things changed in those 5 years. I bought a small, quiet house in the suburbs. It had a big backyard with thick green grass. No swamps, just solid ground. I was now a senior partner at Jenkins Freight. Sarah and I grew our company by 20%. My life was peaceful. But at Vance Logistics, the poison was slowly killing the body. Because of my 30% ownership, I saw every bank statement. I saw every failure. I didn't interfere with their daily work. I just watched the numbers. And the numbers told a very sad story. My father Arthur built his empire on force and fear. But fear does not make a company run smoothly forever. And Lucas was exactly what Dad made him, a beautiful, empty shell. When you give a child everything without teaching them how to work, you are not loving them. You are destroying them. Dad protected Lucas from every mistake. Because of that, Lucas never learned how to survive. The breaking point happened on a rainy Tuesday, May 11th, 2021. I was sitting in my kitchen, drinking a cup of hot green tea. My phone buzzed. It was an automatic email from the Department of Transportation, because my name was on the corporate registry for Vance Logistics. I got copies of major government notices. I opened the email. My stomach dropped. It was a federal audit failure. Vance Logistics was being fined $450,000. The reason? The Vice President of Operations, Lucas, had forgotten to renew the safety insurance and the electronic logging licenses for 45 long-haul trucks. He ignored 6 warning letters from the government. He just put them in his desk drawer, hoping they would disappear. Because for his whole life, his dad always made his problems disappear. But you cannot manipulate the federal government. 2 days later, on Thursday, May 13th, I called an emergency board meeting. When I walked into the big glass boardroom at Vance Logistics, the air felt thick and heavy. The room smelled like stale sweat and bitter coffee. Dad was sitting in his big chair. He looked completely different from the scary giant I knew as a child. He was 65 years old now, but he looked 80. His hair was completely white. His skin was gray and loose. Lucas sat next to him. Lucas was 36, but today, he looked like a terrified little boy. He was shaking. He kept biting his fingernails. I sat down in my chair. I placed the thick stack of government papers on the table. The loud thud made Lucas jump. $500,000, Arthur, I said. My voice was low and steady. I didn't use any emotion, just facts. Because your vice president did not open his mail for 6 months, 50 of our trucks are legally grounded right now. We cannot move cargo. Dad rubbed his eyes with a shaking hand. He looked exhausted. Maya, please, Dad whispered. He didn't yell this time. He didn't have the energy. It was an oversight. Lucas has been very stressed. His wife just had a baby. I will pay the fine from my personal savings. We will fix it. I looked at my father. I felt a strange, heavy sadness in my chest. Not anger, just deep, heavy grief. You can't pay the fine, Dad, I said quietly. I looked at your personal accounts. You took out a second mortgage on your house to pay the bank loans for the warehouse. You don't have $450,000. Mom, who was sitting in the corner chair as a guest, let out a sharp cry. She covered her face with her hands. She knew it was true. Her perfect, rich life was falling apart. Lucas suddenly stood up. His chair fell backward onto the floor. I didn't know, Lucas shouted, his voice cracking. Tears were rolling down his cheeks. He looked at Dad, begging him. Dad, the government website was too confusing. The passwords didn't work. I thought Aunt Clara was supposed to do it. Tell her, Dad. Tell her it wasn't my fault. It was pathetic. A 36-year-old man, a vice president, blaming a confusing website and his aunt. I looked at Lucas. I remembered how he laughed at me in the lawyer's office when I was given the swamp. I remembered how he told me to go play with the frogs. But I didn't want to laugh back. Revenge looks good in movies, but in real life, it just looks like tragedy. Sit down, Lucas, I said firmly. He stopped crying for a second and looked at me. Then, he slowly picked up his chair and sat down. You are 36 years old, I said, looking right into his eyes. You make $200,000 a year. You drive a Porsche, but you don't know how to file a basic safety form. You are a danger to this company, and you are a danger to the truck drivers who work for us. I turned to my father. Arthur, as a 30% shareholder, I am putting a formal motion on the table, I said. The room went completely silent. Lucas Vance is to be removed as Vice President of Operations immediately. He will be given 0 severance pay due to gross negligence. No, Mom screamed from the corner. Maya, he is your brother. He has a new baby. How will he feed his family? He can get a real job, Mom, I said, not looking away from my father, like the rest of the world. Dad stared at the shiny wooden table. His hands were gripping the armrests of his chair so tightly his knuckles were white. If I say no? Dad asked. His voice was just a dry whisper. If you vote no, I will take these federal papers to Miller Industries today, I replied smoothly. When Mr. Miller sees that our trucks are uninsured and failing safety checks, he will cancel our contract immediately. The company will go bankrupt by the end of the month. I paused, letting the heavy reality sink into the room. You have to choose, Arthur, I said gently. You can save your company, or you can save your son. You cannot save both. The silence in the room was so deep it hurt my ears. Only the ticking of the wall clock filled the space. Tick, tick, tick. Dad looked at Lucas. Lucas was sobbing quietly, his face buried in his hands. For the first time in his life, my father could not manipulate his way out of a problem. The math was final. The wall was too high. He had to face the monster he created. Dad closed his eyes. A single tear rolled down his wrinkled cheek. I second the motion, Dad whispered. Dad, no, Lucas screamed. He reached out and grabbed Dad's arm. Please, you promised me. Get out, Lucas, Dad said. His voice was broken. He didn't open his eyes. Just, get out of my office. Give your keycard to security. Lucas looked at me with pure hatred, but I didn't care. His hatred meant nothing. He grabbed his expensive coat and ran out of the room, slamming the glass door behind him. Mom chased after him, crying his name. I sat alone at the table with my father. He looked like a ghost. Are you happy now, Maya? Dad asked the empty room. You broke my family. I didn't break it, Dad, I said softly, packing my papers into my bag. It was broken the day you stole Grandpa's will. I just turned on the lights so you could finally see the pieces. I walked out of the boardroom. The golden child was gone. But the final collapse of Arthur Vance was still waiting in the shadows. 2.5 years passed. It was now Tuesday, October 18th, 2023. The air in Seattle was dry and cold. The leaves on the trees were turning brown and falling to the ground. I parked my car in front of the big, expensive house in Bellevue. It was the house I grew up in, but today it did not look like a rich man's house. The green grass was dead and yellow. The bushes were overgrown. And right in the middle of the front yard was a big white wooden sign from Pacific First Bank, foreclosure, property of the bank. The slow, quiet death of Vance Logistics was finally over. Without Lucas to blame, and without my free labor, my father could not hide his bad business choices anymore. The debt from the mega warehouse was too heavy. The federal fines drained the last of his cash. When the money stopped, the fake family stopped too. Mom filed for divorce in early 2022. She realized Dad could not buy her diamond necklaces or expensive coats anymore. She took half of his remaining personal retirement money and moved to a sunny condo in Florida. Aunt Clara went with her. The enablers always follow the comfort. When the villain loses his power and his gold, his loyal followers disappear like smoke in the wind. Dad was completely alone. I walked up the stone steps and unlocked the front door with my old key. The house was freezing. The heating system was turned off to save money. "Dad?" I called out softly. The word echoed in the empty hallway. There was no expensive furniture left. The beautiful rugs and crystal lamps were sold to pay lawyers. There were only brown cardboard boxes stacked against the walls. It smelled like old dust and stale air. I found him in the living room. He was sitting in a cheap folding chair near the big window. He was wrapped in an old gray blanket. He was 67 years old, but he looked like a fragile, broken man. He was staring out the window at the dead grass. "I brought the final papers, Arthur," I said quietly. He didn't turn his head. He just nodded slowly. Jenkins Freight was officially buying the remaining pieces of Vance Logistics. We were buying the trucks, the client lists, and the name. We were paying exactly $4.5 million, which was the exact amount Dad owed to the bank. He was not making a single penny of profit. He was just escaping prison for his debts. I walked over and put the stack of papers on an empty cardboard box next to his chair. I also placed a hot cup of black coffee from a cafe on the box. I remembered how he liked his coffee, strong and bitter. He looked at the coffee cup. His hands came out from under the blanket. They were thin and shaking badly. He picked up the cup and held it close to his chest for warmth. "Eleanor called me yesterday," Dad said. His voice was scratchy and weak. "From Florida. She said Lucas got a job selling used cars. He is struggling to pay his rent. She asked me to send him some money." He let out a dry, sad laugh. It sounded like paper tearing. "I told her I don't even own the chair I am sitting on," Dad whispered. He finally looked up at me. His eyes were wet and red. "I built an empire, Maya. I gave them everything. And the second the ship started sinking, they left me to drown." I stood there looking at him. 5 years ago, I would have smiled. I would have felt happy to see him suffer. But I didn't feel anything like that now. Hyper-realistic family trauma doesn't end with you laughing at your abuser. It ends with you realizing how pathetic and empty their whole life was. "They didn't love you, Dad," I said gently. "They loved what you bought them. You taught them that money was the only thing that mattered. You taught them that people are just tools. You cannot be angry when they use your own lesson against you." Dad closed his eyes. A tear slipped down his face and dropped onto the gray blanket. He picked up the black pen I brought. He didn't argue. He didn't try to manipulate me. He didn't threaten to sue me. The fight was completely gone from his bones. He leaned over the cardboard box and signed the first page. Then the second page. "Arthur Vance. Arthur Vance." The scratching sound of the pen was the only noise in the huge empty house. Every time he signed his name, a piece of his toxic kingdom vanished. "Maya," he said softly, keeping his eyes on the paper. "Do you remember when you were little? We went to the park. I pushed you on the swings. You laughed so hard." I looked at him. I searched my brain for that memory. "That wasn't you, Dad," I said quietly. "That was Grandpa George. You were at the office." Dad's hand stopped moving. He stared at the signature line. The tragic reality of his life hit him right in the chest. He didn't even have real memories of his own daughter. He traded his family for a business, and now he had neither. He signed the very last page. The sale was complete. Vance Logistics belonged to me and Sarah now. He dropped the pen on the box. He wrapped the blanket tighter around his shoulders and turned his head back to the window, staring out at the cold gray street. "When does the bank want me out of the house?" he asked. "Friday by 5 p.m., I answered. "Where will I go?" he whispered. It wasn't a question for me. It was a question for the universe. The man who used to control everything now had nowhere to sleep. I reached into my bag. I pulled out a small, white envelope. I put it on the box next to his coffee. "There is a check inside for $10,000, I said. "It is from my personal bank account. It is enough to rent a small apartment and buy some groceries for a few months. After that, you will have your Social Security checks." He looked at the envelope. He looked at me, shocked. "After everything I did to you, you are giving me money?" "I am not giving it to you because you were a good father," I said calmly. "You were a terrible father. You were cruel. I am giving you this money because I am a good person, Because my loyalty is to my own humanity, not to your cruelty. You don't have power over my feelings anymore, Arthur. I picked up the signed contracts and put them in my bag. Take care of yourself, Dad, I said. I turned around and walked down the empty hallway. I heard him crying softly behind me. It was the lonely, broken sound of a man who finally realized the truth. But I didn't stop. I walked out the front door, locked it behind me, and stepped into the cool, fresh air. The story of the Vance family drama was over. Only the resolution was left. It is Saturday, June 13th, 2026. The time is exactly 8:40 a.m. The morning sun is shining brightly through the large glass windows of my kitchen. I am 38 years old now. I stand at my counter, waiting for the coffee machine to finish brewing. It makes a soft, happy bubbling sound. I open my wooden cabinet. I do not reach for a cracked white mug. That old broken mug is gone. I threw it in the trash years ago. Instead, I pull out a heavy, dark blue ceramic mug. Sarah bought it for me when we signed our first big contract together. It is solid. It has no cracks. I pour the hot coffee. It smells rich and dark. I take a deep breath. My chest rises and falls easily. There is no heavy rope around my lungs anymore. The house is completely quiet, but it is a good quiet. It is not the scary, tense silence of my childhood. It is the peace of a safe life. 10 years have passed since the night of the big gala in 2016. 14 years have passed since the day in the lawyer's office when my father took everything from me. Life did not give my family a magical, happy ending. In real life, toxic people rarely wake up and apologize. They just slowly fade away. I know my father, Arthur, lives in a small, one-bedroom apartment in a cheap part of town. I do not visit him. We do not call each other. Once a year, on his birthday, I mail him a very simple grocery store gift card. I do not send it because I love him. I send it because I refuse to let his cruelty turn me into a cold person. It is a boundary. I help him survive, but I do not give him my heart. My mother, Eleanor, is still in Florida. She lives with Aunt Clara. Last year, Mom tried to call me on Thanksgiving. I answered the phone. She cried and said she missed her perfect little girl. I realized she didn't miss me. She missed having someone to control. I told her I hope she has a nice holiday, and I politely hung up the phone. I haven't spoken to her since. Lucas lost his job selling used cars. He works at a hardware store now. He still blames everyone else for his problems. He blames the economy. He blames bad luck. He still cannot see the truth in the mirror. DNA is just biology. That is the hardest lesson a person can learn. Sharing the same blood does not mean you share the same soul. Blood does not make a family. Loyalty, safety, and truth make a family. I take my blue coffee mug and walk out to my driveway. I get into my car. It is not the old silver Honda Civic anymore. It is a safe, strong SUV. I turn the key and drive out of the city. 45 minutes later, I arrive in Snohomish County. I pull off the main road and park my car on the side of a dirt path. To my left, standing tall and busy, is the massive 50-acre concrete building, but the sign on the front does not say Vance Logistics. The bright, fresh paint says Jenkins Vance Freight. Trucks are rolling in and out smoothly. Drivers are getting paid on time. The business is alive and healthy. But I do not walk toward the warehouse. I turn to my right. I walk toward parcel 44-890, the 5 acres of mud. It is completely surrounded by a strong wire fence to protect it. I unlock the front gate with a silver key and step inside. The air instantly changes. It smells like wet earth, fresh pine needles, and sweet rainwater. The loud noise of the highway fades away. I walk to the edge of the deep green water. I sit down on a large, flat rock. The swamp is not dead. It is the most alive place in the entire county. Thick, green moss covers the ancient tree roots. Little silver fish swim in the clear, shallow parts. The frogs are singing their loud, messy song. This land absorbs all the dirty rainwater running off the giant concrete warehouse next door. It takes all that heavy, muddy water, pulls it deep into the soil, filters out the poison, and turns it into life. Grandpa George was right. People only see mud. Grandpa's voice echoes in my memory. They only see what is on top, but the real power, the real value, is hiding underneath. I was the swamp of the Vance family. They looked at me and saw dirt. They thought I was unbuildable. They thought I was just a place to dump their anger, their secrets, and their failures. They didn't know that I was quietly filtering all their poison. They didn't know how deep my roots actually went. I hear the sound of car tires on the dirt road behind me. A white truck parks next to my SUV. I turn around and smile. Sarah gets out of the truck. She is 61 years old now. Her hair is completely gray, tied up in her usual neat bun. She wears comfortable jeans and a warm sweater. She carries a brown paper bag. I thought I would find you hiding out here, Sarah says. Her voice is loud and warm. She walks through the gate and sits on the rock right next to me. She opens the brown paper bag and pulls out 2 sandwiches wrapped in white paper. She hands one to me. Turkey and Swiss, Sarah says. No mayo, just the way you like it. Thank you, I say. I take the sandwich. The bread is fresh and soft. We sit there together, eating in silence for a few minutes. We watch a small brown bird dive into the water to catch a bug. The Q2 financial reports came in this morning, Maya, Sarah says softly, looking out at the water. Profits are up 14%. You mapped out that new route through Oregon perfectly. You are brilliant, you know that? I look at her. She is not manipulating me. She does not want a favor. She is not setting a trap. She is just telling me the truth because she is proud of me. I had a good teacher, I reply. Sarah smiles. She bumps her shoulder against mine, a gentle, solid push. We built a good life, kid. Yes, I say. I look down at the deep, quiet water. We really did. I finish my sandwich. I drink the last warm drop of coffee from my blue mug. I look around the beautiful, messy, perfect swamp one last time. I don't feel angry at my father anymore. I don't feel sad for the little girl who used to cry by the loud copy machine. She grew up. She fought her war. She won her peace. My family did not break me. They just showed me exactly who I did not want to be. I stand up from the rock. I brush the dirt off my jeans. Sarah stands up next to me. We walk back to our cars together, side by side. I lock the heavy metal gate of the swamp behind me. The water stays inside, quiet and deep. The heavy concrete world stays outside. Everything is exactly where it belongs.